It is now 6:30. Council has assembled. You are ready to start.
Thanks, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this regular council meeting for the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores and welcome all members and everyone joining us in the room this evening, everyone watching via the live stream. Glad everybody's with us. First item on the agenda is the land acknowledgement, and I will read that. We acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which consists of the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation. We understand this land holds immense significance to the people of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. We appreciate those who live and work alongside us today and who continue the traditions of their ancestors as stewards of the land we are privileged to inhabit. We thank them for the contributions they have made in both caring for the land and in shaping this community. We commit to truth and reconciliation, to acknowledging the truth about what happened to Indigenous peoples because of colonization, and to reconciliation, which begins with each and every one of us. As a local government and public organization, we are dedicated to learning about Indigenous culture, to fostering a better relationship with First Nations and their people, and we commit ourselves to actions that move us forward on a path to healing along with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. Next item on the agenda is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Ask any member if you have one of those you'd like to declare at this time. I do, actually. I have a pecuniary interest in item 10.2 zoning bylaw amendment Z 2023-056 for Carson. The nature of my pecuniary interest is that I am a shareholder in a company that owns land within the statutory distribution area for the application. If there's no other disclosure of pecuniary interest, then we will move on to additions, deletions, or amendments. I do have a couple of changes to the agenda. I'd just like to suggest to council first. I would like to suggest that we move item 7, the close to public meeting, to follow the reports because that item has to do with report number 10.8. So is there any objection to that change? And the second item I'd like to suggest is that we swap item 10.1 and 10.2 so that 10.2 is considered first, considering we have folks in the audience here who are interested in that application. Any objection to that? So we make both of those changes by consensus. All right, thank you. All right, so now we're on to no minutes, no public meetings. So we're on to item number 10.2. So I have a pecuniary interest in this matter, so I will turn the chair over to the Deputy Mayor.
Yes, the mayor has left the room. 10.2 is a zoning bylaw amendment, Z-2023-056. Say them to me. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment application is to rezone a portion of 5331 Bruce Road 3 from agricultural A and institutional I to agricultural commercial special withholding AC2-2-H, agricultural withholding A-H1, and open space special OS-9 to permit a concrete manufacturing and precast concrete facility and a polyvinyl chloride PVC injection and extrusion manufacturing facility without outdoor storage, parking, and a stormwater management pond. I would like to invite the planner, Karina Smith, the senior planner from the county, to make her report.
Thank you.
And Karina, if you could make sure you speak right into that mic. Sometimes people on Zoom have a hard time hearing. Thank you.
Okay, I will do. Thank you. Through you, Chair. So I am presenting this evening on a zoning bylaw amendment application. As the Chair noted, the application is to rezone a portion of 5331 Bruce Road 3 from agricultural and institutional zones to an agricultural commercial special zone withholding, an agricultural zone withholding, and an open space zone with special provisions. If approved, the application will facilitate a partial relocation and expansion of Carson Supply, which is a commercial business currently operating in Port Elgin. The application was presented at a public meeting to this council in February of this year. That was an information report to council and to receive feedback from council and the community. No decision was made at that meeting. The application was subsequently heard at a public meeting in front of County Council on November 21st of this year. That application was approved by County Council, which facilitates the permitted uses within the agricultural areas designation. That application is currently out for its statutory appeal notice timeline. That appeal deadline is December 18th, so this week. So what I plan to do today, my report is quite lengthy and does go into various sections and issues that were identified by members of the public. We did receive many comments from members of the public, most in objection to the application. There were a couple of noted comments which did note support for the application, but the majority were in objection. So for today, I would ask my colleague Jake if he could pull the site plan up for reference. So for council today, I just want to highlight changes that have been made since this application was last before you in February. So as Jake pulls that up, the applicant had originally proposed 2 buildings on the site, which you can see on this plan before you, with a driveway extending from Bruce Road 3 to a parking area. Outdoor storage was proposed with the original application that was before this council. What has changed since that time, the applicant was originally proposing to retain the forested area on the northern portion of the property abutting Bruce Road 3 and to provide a landscape berm along the rest of the northern boundary adjacent the properties to the north and along the west to the church to the west. And there was also a landscape berm protecting or providing a visual barrier to Highway 21 and the property to the south. That landscape berm has been extended now along the entire southern portion of the site that is proposed to be rezoned. And they are also now proposing a treed planting strip along the eastern portion of the site, which is shown on the site plan. It's kind of hard to see on the screen, but there's a 3-meter wide landscaping or tree planting strip along that zone boundary. And that would provide visual screening from anyone using Bruce Road 3 or the golf courses, which are located on the north side of the county road. If I could also, actually, I'll stay on this plan first. So the applicant was proposing a minimum 70-meter separation distance between the industrial uses proposed on the property, which include the concrete manufacturing as well as the PVC manufacturing. The outdoor storage and the buildings was proposed to be a minimum of 70 meters from adjacent sensitive uses, and those would include 3 single-family dwellings to the north, the church to the west, and on the property to the south. It is currently operated as a landscaping greenhouse business, but there actually are 2 permitted single-family homes on that property as well. So they have amended that minimum separation distance to increase to 70-meter minimum to the 2 dwellings to the south of the site. If I could perhaps ask Jake to switch to the revised zoning schedule. So on this plan, you can see the entirety of the parcel. The current zoning is agriculture, which is kind of on your east side or right side of the screen. That is proposed to be maintained as an agricultural zone, but would have a holding applied as it relates to the requirement for a future archaeological assessment should development or site alteration be proposed on that parcel. But as it relates to the industrial uses on the site, the applicant is still proposing the agricultural commercial zone for the industrial uses, which includes the manufacturing buildings and the outdoor storage. What has changed with the zoning is that the minimum 70-meter separation distance, which includes the retention of the woodlot on the north side of the property and a proposed stormwater management facility on the southwest corner, of the property. Those would be in a proposed open space special zone. That open space zone would permit conservation. It would allow for continued agricultural operations, provided there are no buildings or structures, and would also allow for the screening of the industrial operations in the agriculture commercial zones. That's great, Jake. Thanks for that. Other changes that have been made and additional information provided as it relates to this application. The part of the rationale that the applicant had provided through their justification was identifying and satisfying the criteria for non-agricultural uses in an agricultural area. We did ask for further information from the applicant, and we also asked them to look at other sites within the county, including industrial lands both in Kincardine and Brockton, to see if there was alternative reasonable sites available. They did provide that additional rationale, and staff reviewed that with economic development as well as town staff, and we are satisfied with the information that was provided. The applicant has also indicated that they will have a spills response plan on site as it relates to some concerns relating to public health and safety. They are required to provide air emissions testing as well as noise testing to satisfy the applicable ministries as it relates to potential noise and air quality concerns. The applicant has also addressed access to the site. They did, with their original application, provide a transportation impact study and provided a supporting rationale to indicate that even if they used a different methodology for that traffic analysis, the traffic levels on both the County Road and Highway 21 and Carlisle Street are such that any increase or change in methodology would not impact that analysis, and their recommendation was still that the application proceed and that there were no upgrades needed to either the county highway or the provincial highway. As it relates to cultural heritage, the applicant also undertook an archaeological assessment on the property in consultation with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. That report has been reviewed by staff and agencies, including the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, and has been found to be satisfactory. There were no cultural resources found on the property, and no further assessment warranted in the area that's proposed to be rezoned. So those are some of the more substantive changes that have been made to the proposal since the last meeting. Again, my report is quite lengthy and covers a broad area, so I'm happy to answer any questions on that, but I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, Karina. Are there any comments, questions from members of the committee? Councillor Grace first.
Thank you very much, Karina, for that. I want to thank everybody in the public who sent comments one way or the other. And I have a quick question. Well, it's maybe not that quick, but council received a letter this afternoon. In this letter, the author says that the applicant made assurances to County Council during the Bruce County Council meeting earlier this month, where the County Council approved this application from their vantage point. And the assurances were its operation will not exceed 30 cubic meters of concrete production per day. And secondly, that all concrete manufacturing will be for the sole use of the applicant. And so I looked up the draft bylaw, and I don't see those specific phrases in the draft bylaw. I do see in the bylaw 2A2, there's a statement that says this use includes the production of cement for the manufacturing of finished concrete products on the premises only and not for distribution off-site. So I guess what I'd like to hear is, what does that phrase mean? Is that sort of a more complex way of saying that all concrete manufacturing will be for the sole use of the applicant. And then also, if I could get a comment on the assurance about the operation will not exceed 30 cubic meters of concrete production per day.
If I could just interrupt, I'll give you a little time to think about your response, Karina. I was remiss. We have a recommendation that council approve zoning bylaw amendment Z-2023-056 Carson and bylaw 101-2024, and that council resolve that no further notice is necessary with respect to the minor changes in the proposed zoning bylaw amendment in accordance with the provisions of section 34, subsection 17 of the Planning Act. That's the recommendation that's before us. So if I could get a mover and a seconder for that recommendation, then we can continue. Moved by Councillor Halpin, seconded by Councillor Mayette. I also, thank you. Can I just, all in favor? Oh, no.
Not yet,
I guess we have to. Whoa. Got excited there for a minute. I will open the floor for discussion, but I also did want to just comment that the email that Councillor Grace, wow, we have a lot more agenda items tonight. I guess I better get into the swing here again. The email that Councillor Grace referred to came in later this afternoon, so perhaps not all members saw it. And perhaps if in responding to the question, Karina, if you would like to comment about the email and perhaps the letter that came in very late this afternoon just before the meeting, because it may or may not have been something that members have seen. Thank you very much. So go ahead, Karina. Sorry about that.
Yes, thank you through you, Chair. So public comments were included in your agenda package. We did receive a letter and an email today from Mr. Stephen O'Melia, who represents one of the abutting landowners. That letter included, as the councillor has noted, reference to comments made at the County Council meeting in November. And so as it relates to the use of cement on site, so the agent for the applicant did note at the County Council meeting when comparing the use and production of cement for this particular facility, comparing it to other concrete manufacturing facilities like Teeswater Concrete and other examples in the county, that from a comparison perspective, they're looking to do about production of 30 cubic meters on site on a daily basis of cement for use in the precast concrete production manufacturing process. And this is comparatively relatively small to other big cement producers who produce cement and then have trucks that would take that to other sites. In this case, we did include the language in the bylaw that you had referenced, Councillor, that this includes production of cement for manufacturing of finished concrete products on the premises only and not for distribution off-site. So that is why we did include that language. We did not go into the specifics, and I don't feel that it is necessary to go into the specifics of the 30 cubic meters specifically, so that would somewhat limit the applicant and would be an issue potentially from an enforcement side for the town staff when trying to determine if they want on the site how much cement is actually being manufactured on the property. So we did not limit it to a certain cubic meters, and that's the reason why.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, I have a couple of other questions. Thank you. So there will be a new well drilled. The preliminary evaluation indicates that there's sufficient recharge to the aquifer without affecting neighboring wells. Your report says that this will be confirmed through drilling and testing the future well. And it also says, and we can read in the draft bylaw, that there's a holding provision related to the safety of the new well. So my question is, when will this well be drilled in terms of, will this be drilled and will that be settled before construction commences?
Yes, thank you for the question through you, Chair. So the holding provision, any holding provision, unless there's wording otherwise, would indicate that no site alteration, no building permits would be issued until the matters identified in the holding provision have been addressed. So they wouldn't be required to drill that well and for it to be satisfactory to town staff. If there were any issues identified through that drilling process, then that would be sorted out with town staff. And then when staff feel comfortable to lift that holding provision, they would bring that back to council for a decision, and then the remaining work can commence on the site.
Okay, thank you. Can I just keep going? Okay. Regarding source water protection regulations, which are provincial, and in your report, it says that these apply to the section of the property with the stormwater management pond. And as is routine for the source water protection legislation, the applicant will have to develop a risk management plan regarding the stormwater management pond. Is there anything else required on that?
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair. So the risk management plan would be prepared if they were looking to exceed the fuel storage limitation on the property. And so there are actually no requirements as it relates to the stormwater management pond. Typically, policies in the source water protection side look to have policies in effect for stormwater management when there is potential impact to a municipal groundwater fed drinking water system. In this case, Southampton, it is an intake protection zone, so all water courses, water bodies feeding into the immediate Lake Huron area where the water is taken for the municipality, that would be governed and is considered a surface water. And so this is an events-based area. So the only assessment that would be required is the risk management plan for fuel storage, and only if they exceed that 22,500 liters.
Okay. Now, I think one of a major concern for members of the public who have written in on this, and certainly it's a concern for me too, is the question of emissions, airborne contaminants, waterborne contaminants that might result from this processing procedure. And I looked in the application support documents, and all I could see were a couple of documents that seem to have been, or that were authored by, looks like the PVC or plastics industry. What I'm looking for is information about what mitigating actions the applicant will take and maybe is taking with its current operating plant to filter both the PVC processing, the process, any emissions that might result from that, or also the concrete processing. And so could you please comment on that, and also if there's some kind of provincial regulation that would control that?
Yes, thank you for the question, through you, Chair. So the applicant has indicated that at the existing facility, they are required and have prepared an emission summary and dispersion modeling report. And so this is to obtain information about air quality in the area around the manufacturing facility. And that is required when they file an environmental activity sector registry. And so that is governed under legislation from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. And so they would, for the new facility, also be required to prepare that report and would be subject to the standards dictated by the province for air emissions.
And just in terms of waterborne contaminants, I think I asked this question in the previous meeting about the water that's being used in the processing system. It's my understanding, and tell me if anything's changed in this new plan, that the water will not be released into either the groundwater that might end up in the groundwater or in the public water system.
That's correct. So the industrial activity that's proposed on the site is considered a heavy industry, and that's because they do draw water. So they will have the well for manufacturing purposes, and they will be using that for primarily for the concrete manufacturing. The water used for concrete, precast concrete, is used in the form of the concrete products, and so there would be minimal, if any, wastewater from that process. And for the PVC manufacturing, I believe, as the applicant explained at the last meeting, it is a closed loop system. So there is water in that system, but it is a closed loop. And should ever at any point they need to dispose of that water, they would need to seek an appropriate site for that disposal.
And the appropriate site, though, would not be
On the property, no.
on the property or into our water system in any way.
That's correct.
Okay.
Two more questions, please.
Can I just, there's other members who want to speak. Can I
Sure.
just let them and we'll come back to you? Councillor Mayette?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First, I'd like to start off by saying that I've read through this report and compared it to the last report, and I appreciate very much the changes that are being proposed to the site, to berms and tree lines and things to keep the visual effects of this plant out of the neighbors. And I'm also very cognizant that the applicant has a very long track record of abiding by the law and not polluting the waterways. And you can't put water from an industrial process in the ground, or else you get put in jail eventually, right? So they have a very long track record of doing that at their current site, which is in essentially a commercial residential zone with very little complaints that I'm aware of. And I'm very certain that the process they're going to be using out there with the production of concrete pieces made out of cement. And I think a lot of times we hear those two, concrete and cement, used interchangeably. They're actually two different things. So the amount of cement you use is different than the cubic meters of concrete that you're going to come up with at the end, because cement is just a component in concrete. So I'm quite confident that they will do all that's necessary to comply with the law and to make their plant and create 50 jobs in our community as smooth as possible. The one question I do have is the timelines. I wasn't able to ascertain through the material that was provided when they plan on getting the project underway, because in this town in the past, there have been sometimes applications for developments made that for one reason or another got stalled along the way and took long periods of time for them to get started. And I'm just wondering how soon we'll see this get underway and see this excellent addition to our community take place.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Chair. I'm not sure if I know the exact timeline of the applicant, but I know they are quite eager to move ahead, and we've been, as noted, the initial public meeting on this was earlier this year, and so they have been in the process for quite some time. Should council approve this application today, it would be subject to an appeal period as well. And then they also do need to go through the site plan control process. So there will be additional steps with the town, ensuring that all matters of interest to the town through site plan control are addressed as well. And then they will apply for a building permit, but I don't have a specific timeline for you.
All right, thank you. Can I have one more question? The question is to the applicant is, are you planning on getting like an ISO 14001 certification for the facility, which is very much a standard?
Could you direct the question to Karina,
Oh,
not
Karina?
directly to the
All
applicant?
right, to the applicant or to Karina? No, no plans yet. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Halpin and then Councillor Stack.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you. A lot of the letters that the public wrote were talking about hydrochlorine gas, vinyl chloride gas. And just to be sure, there's no vinyl chloride gas involved in this procedure, correct? They're using pellets that are then melted and injected.
Yes, through you, Chair. That is my understanding of the process. And I did do a tour of their existing facility, and they do use pellets in the processing for PVC manufacturing.
Good, thank you. So people don't have to be worried about vinyl chloride gas. 30 meters of concrete produced a day. I just did some quick calculations. That would equal approximately a mid-size house foundation a day. Should be about 3 concrete trucks. Correct?
I can't say for sure. I've never done the calculation.
Okay.
So.
I'm confident that that's what it is. That would make about 150 or 160 feet of 10-inch by 8-foot wall would take 30 meters of concrete. So a typical house has close to 60 meters of concrete in a house floor, footing and foundation. Okay, I really appreciate the effort put into the berms, the mention of conservation area, the 3-meter strip of planting on the side, and the idea of keeping intact that nice little forested area. So I appreciate all those efforts. Thank you.
Counselor Stack?
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. So the existing operations are considered an industrial or heavy industrial use. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then this will expose my lack of industrial experience, but the operations are substantially similar to what's going on now in the existing facility that's located right in Port Elgin.
That's correct. Through you, Chair. They would be, this is considered an expansion of their
Gotcha.
existing operation. The only thing that won't carry over to that new facility is the retail sale component. That will stay in the town specifically.
So then just to sort of clarify, so we have been comfortable for how many years has this been operating in Port Elgin?
Through you, Chair, about 40 years.
Okay, so for 40 years, we've accepted that these operations can happen adjacent to Port Elgin residents. So we've been operating for 40 years, it's okay in Port Elgin. So, okay. So I just want to sort of make clear that we're looking at a fairly sort of consistently operated, it looks like they have a fairly reasonable track record. I think I asked those questions last time about the degree to which they've operated in compliance with all the applicable laws. So I just want to point out that we are comfortable with this facility as it exists today. And I'll just be quite candid, I live just around the corner from the facility. I live at Christopher and Bricker, which is 200 meters, I think, from Carson's facility. So we've been comfortable with this operation in Port Elgin. We have talked a lot about the desire to have that sort of missing middle set of jobs. So I just want to point out to council that we have been comfortable with this operation at my back door and the back door of my of my neighbors. And that we should be mindful and I think it's appropriate to challenge environmental records and the appropriateness of the facility. But we also want to be mindful that it's missing middle. We've been comfortable with their operations to date. It doesn't seem to me that there's been major issue. Perhaps you can answer the question to your knowledge. Have they had any major non-compliances with any labor laws, environmental laws?
Through you, Chair, I'm not aware of any of those.
Okay. So again, I just want to point out that if we're talking about economic development, we've had lots of discussion about missing middle. It strikes me that this opportunity for, I think we said 50 sort of jobs that are in that middle bracket, I think is something we need to consider given, it'd be a different conversation if this facility if this operation didn't already exist and operate fairly safely in the community, but given that it's an expansion, I just think it's worth pointing out as we move forward. Thanks.
Counselor Davinsky?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you. You had indicated that if this gets approved tonight by council, sorry, Karina, not you. Karina, you indicated that if this gets approved by council, there is a 30-day appeal period. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, a 20-day appeal period.
20-day. And who can appeal? Who can take advantage of that appeal?
So it would be limited to the Planning Act specifically says specified persons. That's a defined term. It typically includes utilities and other such agencies. It also includes the applicant, should the application be refused, the minister. Just looking at my list here.
Well, I'll make it easier. So I'm assuming those that have expressed concerns about this operation will not have the opportunity to appeal any decision.
In general, the public would not have an appeal right, correct?
And why is that?
That was
Why do we cut them out?
Yes, thank you for the question. So that was part of provincial changes that had occurred among several other changes over the past couple of years.
Okay, I mean, the report is very good, and I do like the plans and the buffering and what have you. Myself personally, I have concerns about dust control, particularly in the heat of summer. Has there been any indication how that will be handled on site?
Yes, through you, Chair. So the applicant has indicated through correspondence and I believe at past meetings that the outdoor storage will be gravel, but they will employ dust suppression measures to ensure that the level of dust is maintained and doesn't aggravate nearby users. I'm not sure if that can be addressed through site plan control. Yes, I'm getting a nod yes from town staff.
And I'm sorry, what are you getting the yes for?
In terms of dust suppression could be addressed through the site plan control process,
Oh,
which is the
okay.
next step. Should this application be approved tonight, it would be the next step that the applicant would be looking to apply for.
All right. I know Councillor Stack mentioned it and a few others alluded to it, and that's the Port Elgin operation. Are you aware of any concerns or complaints that nearby residents had with that operation, or was that even looked into?
Yes, through you, Chair. So I am aware that the applicant has had complaints about their operation, the hours of operation, some noise complaints as well. And I did tour the facility just to get a better understanding of what those complaints might be and where they're coming from, and did a walk around the adjacent neighborhood as well, just to better understand that. But they have received complaints at their existing facility. The site is just, they've outgrown their site essentially.
But they're still going to stay there
Yes,
even if this is approved.
correct.
Okay. All right. So they have received complaints, and this may be an unfair question. What happened to those complaints?
I'm not sure I can answer that question. I don't have knowledge in terms of how they were specifically addressed.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
And Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Kareem, for your report. Well done. And I did ask a lot of questions back in the summer, and they were addressed. And I really like the idea also, the landscape bermed area and the conservation area and the treed lot that's being maintained. And like Councillor Grace, thank you to all the members of the public. You may comment on this application. You know, there's a lot of passionate views and a lot of passion with some of the views. And can you just again explain to me the runoff water from the roof and from the site? Is it all recirculated? I think it was asked earlier maybe, but just say it again. So all the water is being circulated back through the building that comes off the roof. It's not going into the ground.
They will, so through you, Chair, they will have a stormwater management facility installed on the property that will treat runoff from the site, including from the rooftops. So that would address through stormwater management techniques. It would address the quality of that water before it's released into the nearby ditch, which ultimately traverses to Lake Huron.
Okay.
But that would address the
At
quantity.
one point, there's some talk about recirculating used water through the building. No?
No, I don't recall that conversation
I
specifically.
have
Sorry,
that question
Councillor.
actually, but okay. The agricultural portion for that property, what percentage of the land, total parcel, is being maintained, is being saved, so to speak, for agriculture again? Do you know what the percentage is?
I can do a quick calculation if you just bear with me for one moment. It's well over half the property. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to pull up the number.
It's over 50%.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Just as a comment, and I think the recirculating water was related to the manufacturing process, that was the closed loop situation with the water.
That's
So,
what I
yeah.
just wondered.
Counselor Grace, did you want to finish
Thanks.
off?
Thank you. Yes, some of my comments have been addressed by other members of council, but just Councillor Davinsky's question about complaints from the Port Elgin site. I have never, in all my time in council, never received a complaint about the operation, but you're telling us that there have been complaints, including noise complaints. So is that something that would be how would that be addressed by our bylaw officer? How, did you discuss that with the applicant about how that might be included in going forward?
Yes, thank you through you, Chair. So part of the reason of relocating to the site that's being proposed is that they can provide a greater separation distance between the actual manufacturing and the outdoor storage and the adjacent residential properties. And so with that greater minimum separation distance, which is 70 meters, plus on top of that, they're also proposing the landscaped berm, which will, and the tree planting area. So that is all to help mitigate any impacts from noise. The existing site is about 3 hectares and doesn't allow for that buffering to occur. They maximize their site with the outdoor storage.
So the noise complaints, are we talking about, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm not sure if it's appropriate that we talk about the complaints at another site. The application is for a new site, and we shouldn't be putting anybody or them on trial or.
And like Counselor Grace, in all the years I've been on council, I've never heard of a complaint coming to council either. So perhaps Counselor Grace, if you could finish off with
Well,
that. in
Can I
mind.
reword my question to apply to
Um,
this?
Sure, but we're not talking about their existing site. It's
Okay.
the application is related to their new site.
So I guess my question then is, what would the hours of operation be for this?
So they are proposing to have shift work on the property. And so they would be in operation continually throughout the day.
Thank you.
Is there anything further? Well, if I could ask the planner, we did receive both an email and a letter from a representative of one of the neighbors today. Is there anything else? It came in rather late, but it was circulated to members of council. And I do know that people were aware of it. Is there anything else perhaps that you would like to highlight from that letter, just because it came in so late, so it wasn't printed in the record? It will be part of the minutes, though, following this meeting.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. So through Mr. Amelia representing his clients, we did speak about the statements that were made by the agent at the county council meeting with respect to the production of cement and the use of that cement on site. The applicant, Mr. Amelia has also highlighted perhaps referring to the legal considerations for this application. So because there would be no appeal rights for third-party representatives, his recommendation is that council refuse this application and let the tribunal hear this matter, in which case parties, including potential members of the public, could bring evidence forward. So Mr. Amelia does touch on other issues within the letter. I'm happy to go to any of those specific if there's anything that council would like further clarification or a response on.
Sorry, Counselor Stack?
Just two comments. It was actually that, the letter from, I'm sorry, I can't remember the lawyer's name, from Miller Thompson, the firm that was the sort of catalyst for my commentary. I just want to point out, so we haven't solicited, so he's providing effectively unsolicited legal recommendations to council, and it's not something we've actually requested, just to be clear. That's some residents that have sought legal counsel, which is appropriate, but I just think it's important to recognize that council has not asked for this firm to provide us with legal advice, and it's simply, you're simply repeating unsolicited guidance that he's provided. I think it's important to note that that's not from our solicitor.
Counselor Mayette?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. With regards to the letter, as we're talking about it, the original notice to the public requested that comments be made prior to February 2024, which is 8 months ago. And we receive an email from this lawyer at 4:43, 4:45 on the day of the meeting. And it says in the notice, comments made after the deadline period may be considered for comment. For us to get a letter an hour and 15 minutes prior to a meeting with essentially a recommendation, new information, whatever it is, I think is totally inappropriate. And I think giving any heed to this letter is, and it's not something that I'm presently willing to do, because for somebody to wait till 15 minutes before closing time on the last day is just, it's disrespectful. And I don't think we should consider anything in that letter. Thank you.
Well, I only bring it up because the way that documents are worded, or the application is worded, is that comments received before a decision is rendered are part of the record. So we were just making sure that there was reference to material that came in rather late, because it's not in the package that the public was able to see. Are there any other comments? Councillor Davinsky.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to Karina. It was asked what the hours of operation are. I believe it was Councillor Grace that asked that. What are they? Is it a 24/7 operation? Is it 2 shifts, day and afternoon? What is the hours of operation?
My recollection is it's Monday to Friday, 24 hours a day, but that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no, Councillor Grace.
I'm sorry, but to follow up on that, I wonder if it would be appropriate to get maybe Jay to comment on this. In a zone like this, well, the 24-hour shifts, I guess I'm concerned about noise and disruption to the neighborhood, those adjacent neighbors. If it's contained within the building, maybe there would be none of that. But I guess my question is to our staff, if we could do that, is what would our noise bylaws say about that kind of zone, and what would be appropriate in terms of a 24-hour production?
So I'll perhaps, if staff did want to answer that question, but I'll perhaps note that manufacturing will occur within the proposed buildings, and that the outdoor storage area is for outdoor storage of the bulky products that they will be producing on site. And so most of the manufacturing will be occurring in those 2 buildings.
I wonder if I could still get an answer to my question about the zoning bylaw or the noise bylaw.
I feel as though we're drilling down into operational aspects that go a bit beyond the application. But Jay, do you have a response?
Yeah, so if I just take a few minutes to read through the bylaw, it was not something I had at my fingertips.
Councillor Stack.
just while Jay reads the bylaw, I just wanted to point out, and sorry, I'm reading this sort of the letter from the council and, or from Stephen O'Melia in sort of real time, and I'm getting more irritated by some of the commentary provided. I just want to, like, again, be clear that just what he said here around us denying rights of citizens if we choose to approve the application is, I think, an overreach. And just again, everyone's entitled to have legal counsel, and I think it's appropriate. But lawyers, when they draft these letters by design, make very strong statements in favor of their position. So, if the public were to read this, as a counselor, I think at least it's incumbent on me to say we are following the process designed by law, and simply I have full empathy for people who have concerns with the construction. I think there's lots of good comments that have been raised today about the operations. I understand that may be outside of the existing application, but understanding how they're going to operate the facility is, I think, fair. But just for those who are going to listen to this, or who's on YouTube now, or will listen to it after, I think it's appropriate to note that council is making very strong statements to support the position of their clients, which is appropriate, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an accurate representation of the process today. We are following the process designed by the provincial government, and we are following that appropriately. And simply because a lawyer has written a letter, and frankly, I find some of the statements here, a bit of a finger wag to a small town council. I think it's just worth noting that one lawyer's position on how we may or may not vote does not necessarily reflect how we're actually running the process. And I think it's important to note that.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. I think we've given Jay some time, but the Director of Development would like to make a comment before Jay. You have to give us an answer.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to provide a bit of a preamble to some comments that Karina and Jay may offer on the question of noise. In this part of the process, we're planning something in advance of the activity going onto the land. And when we do that, we follow the provincial D6 guideline for compatibility. So we're going through a planning process to establish a use that, if approved, would meet the guidelines that we use to set back and design and buffer those kinds of facilities. The notion of the bylaw is more to do with what the town does or doesn't do enforcement wise when it gets complaints about noise. So I don't know if there's maybe a two-part answer in terms of Karina maybe elaborating on the guideline, how that works, and then Jay can kind of confirm the applicability of the noise bylaw in this situation, if that's of help to Council Chair.
Certainly, there's a couple of elements there. I guess the first is that notwithstanding whatever our bylaw says, MOE guidelines and regulations would have something to say about that, and I don't have the expertise nor ability to look for that immediately. But secondly, our noise bylaw does provide a general exemption for activities conducted in the rural area, and more specific activities related to the operations of excavators, diggers, whatever other equipment might be for certain times. So that may, I guess, a long-winded way of saying there may be things that our bylaw can regulate if they're in excess of the standards of noise that are allowed in our bylaw, but nevertheless with MOE's guidance and support to implement provincial regulations as well.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask if there's nothing that's pressing. Councillor Halpin, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you. We must also consider that berms and vegetated areas are well-known and well-documented ways to deflect and absorb noise. And that's why they're so widely used. And a berm and that sort of thing is not an inconsequential cost. Didn't say that right. It's not, they're not taking a cheap route out here. They're making a good proper berm with vegetation on it that absorbs and deflects noise. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're at the point where I can call the question. So again, I'll read the motion. The motion is that council approve zoning bylaw amendment Z-2023-056 Carson and bylaw 101-2024, and that council resolve that no further notice is necessary with respect to the minor changes in the proposed zoning bylaw amendment in accordance with the provisions of section 34, subsection 17 of the Planning Act. All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. And I do apologize for wanting to get you guys there faster. You know, we often talk about how quickly things go, but I do apologize for that earlier. And I will give the chair back to the mayor. Thank goodness.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll move on to the former 10.1, which is zoning bylaw amendment Z 2024-025, and we'll turn it over to the planner for the report.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just pulling up my second report. So I am before you again today as it relates to the housekeeping amendments for 2024 to the town's local official plan and the zoning bylaw. The application was first presented at a public meeting in June of this year, and the amendments were brought back to council for a decision in August. The item was deferred, and we did bring back the local official plan amendments and phase 1 of the zoning bylaw amendments in October of this year, and those were both approved. The local official plan amendment was subsequently approved by the county, and both those amendments are now in full force and effect, which means they've passed their appeal period. So the remaining second phase of the zoning bylaw amendments before you this evening, again, a carry forward from those that were presented to you in August. In summary, the changes relate to changes to the parking provisions other than those that were needed with the phase 1 amendments to allow for 4 residential units per residential lot. These amendments also introduce various definitions and zoning bylaw provisions relating to the agricultural area, agriculture-related uses, and on-farm diversified uses. This change before you also proposes to introduce more than one accessory dwelling unit in the highway commercial zone, so essentially allowing for a mixed-use concept in the highway commercial areas of the town. The amendments also propose the introduction of low-density residential building types in the commercial recreation zone. And there is also a proposed increase in height in the institutional zone from 10 meters to 15 meters. There were some other amendments that were not brought forward in the initial phase that are also before you this evening. All of those are in the amendment tracker version 4, which is attached to your agenda package, as well as the bylaw and a consolidated update of the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw, which kind of places those amendments within the context of your zoning bylaw. So in terms of changes that we did make to some of those amendments that were originally presented to you in August, we did, for the purposes of clarity in interpreting and applying the zoning bylaw, we did make reference to a multi-unit building in the commercial recreation zone. We have now broken that out into the actual building types. So in the commercial recreation zone, a multi-unit building would be permitted. The definition of multi-unit building includes single-family, duplex, as well as triplex and fourplexes. We also did update the parking provisions as it relates to secondary schools. There was a lot of conversation about that at our past council meetings. Originally, the town staff were proposing 8 spaces per classroom, and that has now been amended to be 6 spaces. The current bylaw reads 4 spaces per classroom. And we also did make a change as it relates to, there were certain provisions, parking provisions that were supposed to be removed in the August amendments that were brought forward to you. Those were included in the amendment tracker, but were missed in the bylaw itself. So we have included those now. Through the October amendments, we also omitted a change to the lot frontage requirements as it relates to certain building types, and so we have corrected that error as well. But I'm happy to go through any of the changes which are highlighted in yellow in the amendment tracker, which are those that reflect the changes between August and now. But otherwise, I will turn it back to the chair.
All right, thank you. So there is a recommendation that council approve the second phase of zoning bylaw amendment Z 2024-025, Saugeen Shores, and bylaw 100-2024, and the council resolve that no further notice is necessary with respect to the minor changes in the proposed zoning bylaw amendment in accordance with the provisions of section 3417 of the Planning Act. Is there a mover and seconder? Vice Deputy Mayor and Councillor Mayette, questions or comments from members? The Deputy Mayor, and then we'll work our way down.
Thank you. I just want to comment that I still am not in agreement about the changes related to parking. I think we're just setting up potential difficulties in the future. And I understand the intention behind it, but I think we're missing the mark. And to have a report say that, comparisons were made to Guelph, Kitchener, Waterloo, Oakville, Burlington, St. Catharines first, and then Owen Sound, getting a little closer to home, Blue Mountains and Collingwood, with the exception of the Blue Mountains and Collingwood, which I don't believe have transit systems. All those other places have transit systems. So the idea that, we're saying, well, those places only have one parking space or whatever the number might be, it's not comparable in my mind. So I'm concerned that we're setting up challenges for future residents, future visitors, future councils to deal with. I did want to ask though, and it was hard for me to tell, and I did try and sort of hone in on what we were changing with parking. So the reality is, and it got confusing to me about what we did before and then, the way it all scrolled through. But basically what we're changing is we're changing, among other things, we're changing so that any residential, well, most residential units that get built, whether they're an apartment or a detached place or a duplex, it's one parking space per unit. And I know there's a little bit of an exception somewhere in there, but that's basically what we're enabling by changing the parking situation, right? One per unit with no regard for, the location or the availability of on-street parking or the availability of overnight parking at certain times in the year. We're not concerned about that at all. It's just one space per unit is what we're about to pass if we approve this. Is that, generally speaking, I know again there's a few exceptions.
Yes, thank you through you, Chair. So generally in the current amendments before you, when it's a multi-unit building, it would be one space per residential unit.
But for a single, it's, there's a comment, even accessory housing in the commercial core. So a commercial, and I would like to see housing above stores, let's say, but let's say a downtown location in the core in Port Elgin or Southampton can get 2 apartments above them. What we're saying is that there only needs to be 1 residential parking space because it's 1 per 5 in that situation. And again, I just think we're setting up other challenges in the future, but I've made my comments before, and I just wanted to say that I don't think it's right to compare us to locations that have totally different urban structures and urban amenities than what we have. Thank you.
Further comments? Councillor Halpin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I think it's important to remember these downtown areas have been there for a long time. And all municipalities around here are pretty much, our downtown cores are very similar. And, those apartments were there before parking was a thing. So I think it's quite reasonable to have 1 per 5 in the downtown core, considering the way that they were built. And that, and it's also worth saying that there are people without cars. So there's that as well. I wanted to talk about the on-farm diversified use. And I'm pleased to say, the way I'm reading this now, that so if someone on their farm for diversified use would like to rent a portion of their property to a contractor be it a plumber or landscaper or whatever, that they can now do that, correct?
Yes, thank you through you, Chair. So are introducing the on-farm diversified use definition and certain criteria associated with that, and uses that would be permitted in those instances. And again, it's to keep it within scope and scale, identifying that the agricultural area is primarily for agriculture, and those accessory uses should be still limited in scale and scope. And so those provisions would address that.
Okay, thank you. I see that as a positive step. We are a growing community. There's all kinds of contractors and people here. We're very short of employment land, so I think that this is a very logical and reasonable step to be taken. So thank you for including that.
Thank you. Further questions or comments from members? I just had a bit of a concern with the section 3.24.14 electric vehicle parking provisions. I'm just not certain that what's written here is clear enough. For example, in item A or part A of that clause, it talks about for any commercial use, a minimum of 10% of parking spaces shall be designed to permit the future installation of electric vehicle supply equipment. What does it mean to design something to permit? Like, does it mean that the space has to be a certain width? Is that good enough? Does it mean conduit installed so you could pull an electrical line? Is that good enough? Or does it mean that the building has to have a certain electrical supply? Is that enough? Or is it a combination of those things? Does a pole have to be installed? Does the equipment actually have to be there but not necessarily turned on? Like, it's confusing. It would be confusing to somebody reading this to we're imposing a cost on developers by doing this. And the question is, how do they understand what it is they need to provide, and how can they be assured that that standard won't change depending on what enforcement officer is reading the bylaw?
Yes, thank you through you. So the intent is to ensure that the appropriate electrical service is installed to the site. And so that if that equipment were to be installed for the charging station, that service is readily available.
So electric service supplied to the parking spot.
Yes, that's correct.
Like, it would seem to me that's what we should say. So it's clear, because it's not very clear to me what's being asked in that particular item. And then item or part C says all designed electric vehicle parking spaces shall be clearly marked and labeled. Again, I'm unclear as to what we're requiring there, because we aren't asking anybody to actually set up a working EV charging station here. The requirement is that they design it so it's possible to run the electrical service, although that's not necessarily clear in the wording here. So are we saying that they need to mark the space even if it doesn't have a working charging device in it? That would seem to be confusing, at least to people who might be pulling in. Like, is that what we're requiring?
Well, if I may, Mayor,
course,
I
Kenny.
think what we're requiring is that it's meant to be flexible at this point, because it's applied only for commercial use, where we have an additional dialogue with those builders, developers through site plan. So there's a few opportunities. One is through our development guide, which we're going to be doing an update. I think it's in the business plan to do an update where we can provide the standards which developers would be obligated to meet or on a submission. And then when it gets expressed through an agreement, for example, we would be able to require drawings to be able to outline whatever that is. So if it is, say it's the underground infrastructure has to be available, it's in the agreement, we know it's there, and can be satisfied that, when the time comes that they flick the switch, that we've got the capacity to do it.
I see what I'm saying here is that this is a circumstance where flexibility is no good, right? Because somebody needs to read this and understand what the obligation is going to be. It has to be in writing, because what's unfair to the developer is for them to enter the process not knowing what the standard is. And for each subsequent time they come forward, if one day they meet you, Jay, next day they meet somebody else, some, new people 20 years down the road, and it's always a different answer. And that's very frustrating, particularly when it's a costly venture like installing enough power to run a level 2 charging station, which is a pretty penny. That's going to cost the developer a lot of money. So I just think that we need to clarify this so we set out exactly what we're expecting them to build and exactly when we're expecting them to mark a space as, we should just be very clear. I just don't think it's clear enough. And also, item D, which is a smaller item, is, part D is that it won't apply prior to the date of the passage of this bylaw, which starting the day after we pass this bylaw is a date no one will remember, right? So that date ought to be written in here, like we should pick January 1, 2025 or whatever the date is, and put that in the bylaw because people need to know, right? So I think this piece needs to go back and get clarified. I would want clarity in here, specificity, so that as a matter of fairness, clarity is kindness, and we should try to be clear on this item. So to me, I don't support that section as it's currently worded. I would like to see it deferred and reworked. But anyway, those are my thoughts. The Deputy Mayor?
I'd like to move that we remove that section and defer it to a future meeting.
Moved by the Deputy Mayor. Is a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Mayette. Any further discussion to that item? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Further discussion on the rest of the items. Councillor Stack.
Just a question, and I'm not sure who to direct it to. Do we get, certainly at the Saugeen Shores level, does our or our solicitor review some of the drafting? Because I have a few sort of drafting comments I would make that I think is common feedback to all bylaws in every municipality that's ever existed. Is I think we maybe there are a few instances where I just felt like we're using language that has a specific meaning that adds, like when we use terms like may include. So I'll use the example. We were talking about the definition of multi-unit buildings, I think. I'm trying to read my writing, so I'm probably not going to get this right. But we use the term, may include. The issue I have with that is when you write things like may include, well, I think what you're trying to say is a multi-use building can be any of the following: a single detached, a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex. And it's a minor point, but I only raise it. We've had several discussions here. We've had some clarity, a lot of commentary around the clarity of our language. I just wonder for something like this, if it's worth having Tammy review it from a drafting perspective, because we keep getting the same issues raised around clarity. And I know certainly, I wouldn't say I'm the best lawyer on the planet, but when I read bylaws, I often question my legal education because I struggle sometimes to read them. And I think it's because there's a unintentional lack of clarity. So I say that only that maybe it's worth for this particular item that we have our council review it just from a drafting perspective, because I think there's a lot of opportunity to clean up. And there's a reason lawyers exist. I know we don't like them, but on occasion there's value. And this may be the one circumstance where we could actually get some better clarity if we have that second eye. I certainly am not going to oppose what we've put in here for that basis, but I offer it as for consideration.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions at this time? Okay. So the resolution has been amended now, so it is moved and seconded already, and it is as amended. So I'll ask then all in favor of the resolution as amended. That is carried. Thank you. Okay, so now we're moving on to 10.3, which is comments on the new Bruce County official plan, and we'll turn that over to the Planning Policy Coordinator, Kristen Sears.
Good evening. There we go. And through you, Mayor Charbonneau. Tonight I am recommending that Council endorse the comments in this report and forward them to the County of Bruce for consideration. in finalizing the new county official plan. So the County of Bruce has proposed a new official plan, is reviewing feedback before a final draft is brought to County Council, which is anticipated in early 2025. The new official plan sets out the goals, objectives, and policies for land use planning in Bruce County until the year of 2046. The proposed official plan is both the town's upper tier plan and serves as the land use plan for the area outside of the boundary of the local plan or settlement area boundary in Saugeen Shores. The proposed official plan contains content from the current county official plan and includes work previously adopted by council in preparation of the plan, being the agricultural amendment, good growth management, and implementation amendment. So in review of the proposed county official plan, topics that have undergone substantial change or of key interest to the town have been outlined in this report and further examined as they relate to or affect the recently implemented provincial planning statement. As well as local context of Saugeen Shores, the identified proposed change, analysis of change, impact on the town, and our recommendation. The report is quite lengthy, so I will just quickly touch on the topics that were reviewed and spoken to, which include the settlement area boundary expansion or adjustment, housing, cultural heritage, agriculture, natural heritage, as well as some other additional comments that are not necessarily relevant to those particular topics. Ultimately, the town is supportive of the draft county official plan, but do ask that the county consider the comments outlined in this report before a final draft is brought to county council. That is just a quick little summary of the report, if anyone has any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So there is a recommendation that council endorse the comments in this report and forward them to the County of Bruce for consideration in finalizing the new county official plan. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Grace, seconded by the deputy mayor. Questions or comments to the report? And first and foremost, I must say thank you for your work on this report. Some excellent work and a good, I think, a good expression of the town's views. So thank you very much. The deputy mayor, do you have comments?
Just a couple of things. The housing section intrigued me because the county seems very keen on establishing and implementing minimum targets for low and moderate income housing. I applaud that initiative. I just feel though that, you know, we've increased densities here, we've reduced red tape here, we've waived development charges, and we're not getting any results in that in my opinion, in meaningful ways yet to hit that low and moderate income housing market target. So I look forward to seeing what they think will take their minimum targets into action plans that actually have some guts and real opportunity. I did find it interesting that one of the comments, and I confess I don't know if it was from my read of their official plan or from your comments, Kristen, but you know, they were working to add in additional wording into their plan about affordable and attainable housing. And I found it, again, very supportive and encouraging. However, those words have disappeared from language here. You know, we went from, in my read of waivers with development charges, it was for affordable housing, then attainable housing, and now we've kind of landed on this universal design will get you a waiver. So I welcome the idea that the words affordable and attainable with appropriate definitions will be back into written documents, because I think that that's it's not a step backwards. I think it's a good step forward. I did want to ask though, it's mentioned that they're doing in their natural heritage section, it was mentioned that we're planning to do our own update to our plan. Can I just ask when that's and when that's in the timeline for us? Is it 2025 or 2026?
The director can speak to it.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a work plan, a priority for 2025.
For that. And I did want to say that I appreciate whatever comments you made to the county to show support for the idea of public art that was mentioned in your report. I think that it's sometimes, you know, the way things look or pretty things to look at or interesting things to look at kind of get missed in the dialogue. But very relevant to creating a beautiful place to live. So thank you for the report, and I welcome whatever we can do following through on some of their ideas about housing to kind of see how to get those low and moderate income housing units built. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Grace and then Halpin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kristen, great work. Thank you for this. I sent a couple of questions, but the one I wanted to just clarify was the comment on cultural heritage and alignment with the provincial planning statement. And your report indicates that the new plan changes means that properties listed on a municipality's heritage register that have not been designated are no longer required to be conserved. So my question about that was tied in with the changes to the Heritage Act. The provincial government recently extended the period of time when properties that are on municipal heritage register that are not designated will allow them to stay on the register without being dropped. The significance of that in terms of the question of conservation and protection is the rule on demolition permits. It's my understanding currently that demolition permits on properties on the register and designated, that there's a 60-day waiting period instead of 10, and that will change. So your answer to me indicates that this really doesn't, that's still going to be governed by the Heritage Act, not the provincial planning statement. Is that true?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau, yes, that is correct, from my understanding.
Okay, so really, they're just saying they're not, the county is just saying basically we agree with what the provincial planning statement is saying. I don't really understand that, Jay.
Manager
maybe?
Development Services.
Yeah, I wish I could rewritten this part of the report, but I think the takeaways are a couple. There's one is the county plan enables us to use tools that are available to us under the Heritage Act to designate and register properties. Because our official plan only covers the settlement area, we do need the county plan to cover the entire town if we want to be able to apply them to, say, Burgoyne or North Bruce, for example, or in other rural parts of the town. And then I guess secondly, the other element is, because the plan is enabling, it encourages to use these tools. We still do have to apply the Heritage Act 60 days process. And I really, without scooping a report that's coming shortly, hopefully next month, the Cultural Heritage Master Plan will provide tools and guidance on how to do that, give us templates and resources to be able to do that in an effective and efficient way over the next, well, I guess we have 2 years, so.
Thank you very much. That's it.
Councillor Halpin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I'd like to comment on the settlement area boundary expansion or adjustment. And so I'm correct to say that there's going to be no change to that at this, with these comments right here, correct?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So there has been identified a requested site by private landowners that are currently being considered. I don't think they've actually finalized what those boundary expansions, or if any, will be actually effective or taken into place.
Okay, so through you, Mayor. So we are not in this report or these comments advocating to increase our settlement boundary area.
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau, no. We believe at this time it's premature and that additional studies are needed before we can justify a potential expansion. But where a request may come in and it does comply with regulations, it is permitted through the provincial planning statement.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy with our current settlement boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments to the report? I have two comments. I think one thing that isn't mentioned in this report, but is something that ought to be of concern, I think, to the town of Saugeen Shores, something that we should focus on and comment on, is the significant groundwater recharge areas. And if you look at the map in the, you see the Bruce County Official Plan draft schedules, it's the very last map in there. You'll see it shows the significant groundwater recharge areas as mapped in the plan. And you'll note, if I can drag it out here, I'll show you I lost it now. So here we go. So you can see there, it's in yellow on the map. And if you look at the town of Saugeen Shores and our settlement area, you'll note that large parts of the settlement area, particularly in the town of Port Elgin, are mapped as being significant groundwater recharge areas. And if you look at the criteria for development on that map, it says maintain recharge function by avoiding or mitigating intensive development in large impervious areas. So in other words, it introduces language that says that we should mitigate intensive development and large impervious areas in most of Port Elgin's development area, settlement area. I think it's very concerning to the town's development potential within its settlement area that those policies might be there. This is area that has long been identified as developable within the town of Saugeen Shores, and it is area that ought to be developed as intensively as possible so that we can avoid expanding the settlement boundaries and spilling out onto more farmland and into more forests. And this policy, if implemented, at least in my reading, runs the potential of limiting our ability to develop those lands intensively, and effectively making us mitigate against intensive development. So to me, I think that that policy, while potentially appropriate outside the settlement area, is not appropriate inside the settlement area. That for better or worse, we are going to develop those sites. We've accepted those are going to be developed areas, and we should accept that development, just like it will have an impact on what's on the surface, it may also impact the ability of the groundwater to recharge in that specific area. And I think that we should say that we should not impose limitations on development in that area that are going to just lead us to sprawl out sooner. So I would really like the town of Saugeen Shores to forward some recommendations or some comments to the county to request that the criteria for development for significant groundwater recharge areas not apply within the settlement boundaries of the town of Saugeen Shores. So that's my view on that. And then the other comment I would make is with regard to cannabis production, actually. And you'll note that there's language now in the plan. This first time that cannabis production has been identified in the Bruce County official plan. And it's identified there because we can't prohibit cannabis production. It's an agricultural activity, and you couldn't sterilize it, nor am I advocating that we should do that. But I also don't necessarily believe that cannabis production should be permitted in all rural and agricultural areas of the municipality. Like, there should be some more control. Cannabis production is, I mean, if you've ever been in the Bruce Energy Center and near 7 acres, it produces quite a foul odor over a great area. And I just am not super comfortable with saying in a blanket way that cannabis production should be allowed in all agricultural areas and all rural areas of the town of Saugeen Shores, or frankly, the county of Bruce. So I'm not suggesting it should be prohibited, but I do think they should find a way to contain that rather than just a sweeping permission. So I would suggest that as a comment to the county as well. Obviously, these are comments that I will make at the county level as well. The cannabis one is perhaps less specific to the town of Saugeen Shores, but I would appreciate council's discussion of the significant groundwater recharge areas and our consideration of that, because frankly, my comments won't mean very much if the town of Saugeen Shores, if this council doesn't view it as a significant issue. So my thoughts, the deputy mayor.
Would it be appropriate through you to ask for the county to do a deputation or a report to us about this specific mapping? This is Schedule F, because you're right. You know, I looked through the maps, and because they weren't linked into our report, you know, I just was looking at them and, oh, this is interesting. But when you actually take the time to look at it, I don't completely understand what the yellow on the map means and what it would restrict and that sort of thing, because, you're right, it's significant portions of what's already in the settlement area. Would it be appropriate to ask for a specific report for a future council meeting, very specific to this Schedule F map? And then our staff would have the ability to comment about what it means for us, because it wasn't picked up in the overall report, which Kristen did, which was fabulous.
I think we can ask that. Maybe I just ask Kristen or planning staff to comment on the significant groundwater recharges. You didn't identify it as a concern. Is there a reason for that?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. This report was a bit of a team effort,
Sure.
just based on everyone's different levels of experience. So I may just have Candace Ham respond.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. With the significant groundwater recharge areas, there isn't actually any mandatory regulations that can go along with that. So yes, there's a schedule. Yes, there's this area that's been identified as a significant recharge area, but there aren't any regulations associated with that. For Saugeen Shores, it's only the events-based areas that actually have regulations. So we didn't pick it up as something that we thought needed to be included in the comments at this time, simply because there aren't any regulations that would restrict development at the current time.
But is it true that the Source Water Protection Committee or Authority or the province of Ontario could create restrictions in the future that might, with now this wording's in the bylaw, might in fact impose restrictions?
Yes, through you, Mayor Charbonneau. Yeah, there could be changes that come out of the Source Water Protection Act in the future. And so if there does need to be wording change, that could be reworded in terms of the comments back to the county to ensure that we aren't including something in the county official plan that could restrict development in the future should those regulations change.
So I would just say back to the deputy mayor, I think we could request that the county give us more clarity, but I would ask council to flag it at least today as part of this, because recognizing that the county is deep into its process to heading toward considering this approval of the OP, I think we need to, if council shares my concern, that we should flag it in these comments so that council is aware we're concerned about it at least. Further comments, Councillor Halpin?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm looking at that map right now. And if you're just going by the yellow colored area, we have developed on those areas already. Right? So is it a concern? So at any rate, I see areas on that map that are well developed with streets and neighborhoods. I'm familiar with them and they're on those areas right now. So if is a concern, I guess my comment would be more information, I suppose, is always welcomed and a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the issue is the new regulation that goes with it. Like it's there's part of those areas there that aren't developed and areas that are, but now there's a new regulation that might require us to start mitigating development because of it, that has not been in place before. So that's where my concern comes from. If it was just an identifier on a map, I wouldn't be worried, but now they're saying because of that, you may need to mitigate development. Read that for me, Mark. Mark has, could you just read? Mark has an idea on this.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a possible additional comment that council could consider offering would be along the lines that the town of Saugeen Shores requests that the county official plan address concerns with the potential for significant groundwater recharge areas to restrict future development in the settlement area, which is fully serviced and does not rely on groundwater for municipal water supplies.
Does anybody support adding that to the?
Should be a council recommendation.
Yeah,
not staff.
Council would add it to these comments. The deputy mayor moves it. Councilor Gray seconds it. Is there any further discussion on it? Seeing none, then all in favor? That's carried. Okay. So those are my concerns. I don't know if anybody is concerned at all about cannabis, but like I say, I'll raise that later. Any other comments, Councilor Halpin?
Just through you, Mayor. You know, I grew up on a small farm outside of Elmwood, and now even more so, farming is very industrial. And I caution anyone that wants to live in the country, farming is very industrial. There are huge pools of pig manure out there, and then they spread that manure and they spray fields and they, you know, so there's just there's a cost, or farming is very industrial. And I think we need to accept that today. There's a lot of people to feed, although you could argue the necessity of cannabis, but.
Good points. Thank you. All right. Is there anything else on any of this before we consider the main question? Seeing nothing, then I have read the recommendation, and it has, so it'll be that we endorse the comments as amended. And so I've had a mover and seconder, right? I think I did. So all in favor then? That's carried. Thank you. All right. So now we will move on to County Planning Services Agreement, and we'll turn that over to the Manager of Planning and Development.
Yes, and if it's not too late, I guess the cannabis comment went up in smoke. Am I allowed to do that? I don't know. Apart from one comment, so. Yeah, well, this is why I'm here. We're talking about the county memorandum of or planning services agreement, rather. The current planning services that the county offers now are governed by a memorandum of understanding from more than 25 years ago. And since the last review, it's really been prudent for the county and town and all local municipalities to discuss the services the county planning department offers and how those services could be improved, confirm their roles and responsibilities of both the town and the county, and then developed a shared understanding of when circumstances arise, there's an agreement on how those can be resolved. Any of those issues could be resolved. So the attached agreement, the purposes are to eliminate unnecessary duplication, to clarify the roles and responsibilities, increase accessibility for the public and applicants, and create efficiencies and otherwise maximize benefits of the relationship. In short, it essentially codifies what's already happening, and both the town and county continue to improve services to the community. What's not in the report is the county, Bruce County considered this services agreement, I think, about a month ago, and so we're bringing it to counties, bringing it to all the lower tier municipalities, asking to enter into the same agreement. So I'll leave the comments there and allow you, Mr. Mayor, to take it from here.
Thank you. So there is a recommendation that council adopt bylaw 102/2024, bylaw to authorize the entering into of a services agreement with the county of Bruce for the provision of land use planning services. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Stack, seconded by Grace. Questions or comments? I will just make the Councilor Halpin, yeah.
Through you, Mayor, will there be additional costs with this, or can we expect to see cost savings with an agreement like this? Thank you.
I don't expect any changes to the costs. What we do expect is really potentially a re-examination of this agreement. And I should highlight this now, is when we look at our community planning permit system, a change in how this, so in other words, in a year from now, we may have to come back and talk about how that service is offered. But I don't expect any change. The fees that are set by the county have been recently updated. Fees that we've looked at have been recently updated. I don't think there'll be a lot of change apart from what already has been directed on those fees.
Thank you. The Deputy Mayor.
A couple of things. I was genuinely surprised that the memorandum of understanding dates back to 1999. Just when amalgamation happened, I was pretty surprised that we hadn't updated it since then, because I can remember the county planning doing more with council during a previous term. Anyway, I wanted to ask for specific comments about, there's language in here about how the municipality is the approval authority for minor variances and other committee of adjustment applications and for site plan approvals. But then there's also other language in the document that sort of says that the county planning department has some involvement in that too. Is the, ultimately, we're not, and there's something in here about delegated authority to pass minor bylaws. We're not giving the county any more responsibility than what we've sort of experienced, because the language is just before us. It's not setting up that we're delegating or giving up any of the authority that we maintain as both the Committee of Adjustment and as council. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, fair assessment. It's not intended to reflect any change in the service that you're getting now. Any further delegations that either the town or county may wish to do would happen in a further process or discussion.
Okay, 3 other points for clarification. There's something about the planner being attendance at our municipal office for access to people. When the renovations get finished, there is a space where that sort of opportunity would exist. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's fair. We've tried to make that in the system now, not the renovation, but previous systems where we've had rotating space for staff to come in, and we've offered opportunities to set schedules, but we've liked in this agreement to codify what we're already doing.
And there's very specific comments in the actual agreement, which relate to appeals to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And I guess I think the message has been conveyed that the importance of when there's public meetings involved, that when we have the county planning staff involved, that we don't receive a recommendation in advance of the actual public meeting, because then it sets up a different kind of dynamic. And because, of course, if we then, if the recommendation is to approve something and then council says, no, we're not going to approve, there's language in the agreement about what happens at the Ontario Land Tribunal. And I think it's important that every member of council read that, because, and also that we get information coming to us in the right form, that recommendations show up at the right time. To take into account the way that the process works. I did want to ask too, there's reference in there to a mid-year status report. Is that status report is coming from the county related to the number of applications and that sort of thing and the types of applications? Is that status report made to staff, or is that something that will come to council? And I just don't recall it being here. Maybe it's shown up in a different fashion, but just is that something that has happened, and is it to council or to staff?
Well, it hasn't happened, and certainly we can make it as a regular meeting, because county deserves to be able to report on the activities they've been doing, as well as inform the community in which they're serving. So,
well, I think it would be a nice addition to the mix going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Further comments? Just 2 comments, I guess, and I think this is a really great document. I appreciate the work that staff at both levels have done on it. And two important things to note that have changed. One is Jay referenced that community planning permit systems are now envisioned in this document. So the county is now accepting that if we were to switch over to that kind of planning process, that they would support us and continue to provide this service in that context. Obviously, that's something we're eager to pursue. So I think that's really a great change here. Appreciate the county's willingness to do that. The other one is item 2C, delegation of county responsibilities. And this is a change that stating that the county may by bylaw delegate its own responsibilities under the Planning Act, which would be things like subdivision agreements, things like severances, different things that are currently held at the county level. The county council may delegate those authorities to this council. But it also makes clear that notwithstanding that the county will continue to provide planning services to the town if that were to happen. So the county has sort of created a concession saying that that if its council were to give us the power to say approve a consent, then the county planners would still help this council make that decision in the same way that they help county council make it. So that's an important decision. What it does is give this council the flexibility, working with Bruce County Council, to take on that decision making here at the local level, rather than as it is now down in Walkerton. So I think that I think that's something that's now possible. I'm not saying we might necessarily pull that trigger today, but it's good to see that it's possible in our agreement, because it's something I think this council or future council may want to consider. So saying it's an excellent document and some good changes there. So if there's nothing further, I have read the recommendation. It's been moved and seconded. I'll ask all in favor. That is carried. All right, so we'll take at this point a break. We'll reconvene at 8:25. All right, guys, we're going to call this thing back to order. Yeah, that's right. No, he's good. He's good. Okay. So we're going to move on now to item 10.5, which is the urban tree canopy plan, and the planning policy coordinator, Kristen Sears, has that report.
Okay, so through you, Mayor Charbonneau, I am here tonight recommending approval of the urban tree canopy plan. The urban tree canopy plan project has provided the town with an opportunity to better understand the current health and condition of tree canopy in Saugeen Shores. It is focused on how existing practices, policies, and regulations affect the urban tree canopy while determining what procedures and policies are needed to maintain canopy cover in the future. In October of this year, the Urban Tree Canopy Plan discussion paper was presented to Council for feedback and was posted on Engage Saugeen Shores for community input. Last month, the Environmental Ad Hoc Committee presented their final report, which included recommendations related to the Urban Tree Canopy Plan and bylaw. I wanted to quickly highlight some of the comments that were received and are now considered in the plan, which include recommendation 1 is regarding education. So there was an emphasis on education needed to be considered in the plan. So in response to this, the plan has been revised to better express the importance of education and educational opportunities in recommendations 7 and 17. A section of the plan now outlines awareness and education as an important component of the plan, with the identified recommendations also provided. Recommendation 3 was regarding funding of tree planting. So a comment on council was that the town not only develop plans to plant trees on municipal lands, but also ensure that the town fund the planting of trees on municipal lands. So recommendation 7 of the plan has been revised to include direction to continue to fund planting trees on municipal lands. Recommendation number 6 was regarding the urban tree conservation bylaw. So the Environmental Ad Hoc Committee final report provided comments on the urban tree conservation bylaw. The comments formed the basis of now recommendation 21 in the recommendations table and as presented in my report. Recommendation number 7 was regarding lands outside of the settlement area. So it was suggested that we introduce a clause in the plan addressing all other land not contained in the settlement area boundary as identified in Schedule C of the town official plan. A clause addressing all other land not contained in the settlement area boundary has been included to encourage consideration for the recommended strategies and guidelines outlined in the plan and as per council's discussion. Recommendation 8 was regarding community tree planting. So the town should expand community tree planting programs and identify these within the plan. Additional language has now been included in the plan to address the continued exploration and support of community tree planting programs. It is also worth noting that a 10,000 tree planting initiative was included in the 2025 business plan as a public works future year highlight in 2026 to 2033. Recommendation 9 was in regards to tree sale diversity. So the town incorporate the recommended tree species lists in the town's annual tree sale day and diversify the size and profile of trees available for purchase. The town will share the recommended tree species list identified in Appendix D of this plan with affiliated coordinators and organizations integral to the town's annual tree sale day. Diversification of sizes and profiles will also be considered, allowing greater variation in costs per tree. Updates, including educational opportunities through this program, will also be further explored. So just for convenient reference, the recommendations are set out in the table, and as you may see on the screen, and they are categorized into short, medium, and long term. Short term means recommendations that can be carried out within the next 1 to 2 years. Medium term means recommendations which can be carried out over the next 3 to 5 years. And long term means recommendations which can be carried out over the next 6 to 10 years, or which require ongoing implementation to achieve being a 10-year plan. The priority type of each recommendation has also been outlined and have been determined based on the ability to implement and the importance of implementation in its contribution to the preservation of the town's tree canopy. So once the urban tree canopy plan is adopted by council, the recommendations will be incorporated into the town's infrastructure, asset management, land use, and business planning, as well as operating procedures where applicable. A draft urban tree conservation bylaw will be presented to council for consideration in early 2025. Measures to implement the plan that would entail initiatives, budget expenditures, or staffing resources that are not contained in the 2025 budget will be brought forward to council for consideration and approval before activated. So that's just a quick once over of the urban tree canopy plan. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. First, there's a recommendation that council approve the urban tree canopy plan. Is there a mover and seconder? The Vice Deputy Mayor and Councillor Grace. Questions or comments? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll be supporting this recommendation. Kristen, I just want to thank you and Jay, and I don't know, Candace be involved too, all three of you, but you know, when we started to write this tree canopy program, this plan through a consultant. Thought they did a really good job in the first draft, but you took over and basically rewritten. You listened to council's comments, and we didn't have to go back and spend more money on more consultant fees, but you took it on internally, and I commend you for that. I think that's it's admirable, and just want to thank you for the great work. I think we've got a really good tree canopy plan underway here, and I think it's going to be add a lot of good things to our community. The 10,000 tree program is exceptional. The recommendation 21, the town develop a tree conservation bylaw built on the following objectives: that active enforcement to protect municipal trees and plants. Is that leading, in your view, to a bylaw enforcement officer position to enforce that? Is that what you're saying? Or can you explain what you mean by active enforcement to protect municipal trees and plants? Who will do that?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So that would be through an enforcement role. But at this time, in development of obviously the final urban tree conservation bylaw, I think at that time we would have a better understanding of what those resources may look like. But this is a recommendation based on current capacity.
Okay, I just see current capacity, but I just see short term and a high priority. And I'm just wondering, you know, how that enforcement is going to take place with internally by who?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So yeah, it would be through enforcement.
Maybe the Manager of Development Services has a comment?
Yes, if I may, I think that just highlight short-term means within the next 1 or 2 years. And I think what we advised during the business plan discussions is that over the next while the bylaw is being considered, we'll also consider the operational requirements at that time as well. So we'll be presenting that, something that can be done over the next 1 to 2 years as the bylaw is developed in the early part of 25. I don't want to hedge and say like, provide a date that's not reasonable, but you know, once we have a bylaw, it may not be implemented for a while after that it's first looked at. And then on the priority, I think it's related to the impact it could have on the tree canopy. So we think it's a high impact, particularly of municipal owned trees, to be actively protecting them from damage or removal.
Anyways, Mr. Mayor, will be, that'll come back to council anyways, in terms of whether there's a new position created for tree permitting and you know, active enforcement to protect our municipal trees and plants. I guess it'll be coming back anyways. There's no point debating that too much tonight, is there, in terms of if we're going to be hiring a new position to do that? I just see it's a short-term high priority. What you're saying is 1 to 2 years, so that's fine. Thank you. Again, just a great job you've done with making the changes and bringing this home. So thank you.
Thank you. Further comments from members? Grace and then Helpin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Kristen and Jay and Mark and everyone who was involved in this. When back in 2022, when the first environmental committee came forward with a proposal to develop a tree conservation bylaw, it was, I had a different view in mind, or I had a different thought of what this might look like. I really like the direction of this. We discussed this issue extensively in the current Environmental Action Committee. And I think what we've come up with is a really good compromise. Members of our committee who have a lot of, one in particular has a lot of professional experience in this in another municipality. You know, the issues raised in terms of trying to enforce tree conservation on small private lots was the most troublesome point of discussion for us, I think. And practically speaking, that would be difficult to do. It would be expensive. And I've read about situations where that kind of law can have unintentional negative consequences, where people hearing about sort of a strict conservation bylaw on private lots of, you know, deciding, you know, if a tree is a certain size or whatever, you can't cut it down without inspection or okays or whatever, ends up in people sometimes raising their entire lot preemptively to avoid that situation before it passes. So I think this is a really good compromise. The emphasis on education and incentivization is great. The detail that's included in this and in the discussion paper about protecting our municipal trees and plants, you know, all of the information on the tree protection zones, the guidance on types of soils to be used for planting trees, the tree spacing, all of that will be very valuable for our staff. And the putting more money, investing more money into expanding our tree canopy, to diversifying the forest, those suggestions. I've always loved the idea of these microforests since I first read about them with the first Environmental Committee, and I'm really happy to see that as a recommendation. One question I had, which is in recommendation number 22, and that is on the issue of trees, hazard trees. And what happens if you have a hazard tree in a usually this happens in a residential area, on a lot, an adjacent lot, which is still treed, and you have hazard trees posing a danger to the adjacent property, which has happened a number of times. Up until now, our advice has been, we can't really do anything with that. This is a matter to be worked out between the property owners. So your recommendation is that this would be handled through a revised property standards bylaw or the clean yards bylaw. Is that right?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. Yes, that's correct.
And what changes do you think would have to be made to that bylaw to accommodate that?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. At this time, the property standards bylaw does not define what a hazardous tree is considered. So obviously that would be probably our first step, is identifying that. And I think there's the potential, like it's currently open-ended at this time, where maybe it is just addressing town land, or maybe it is all lands. But I think a more careful, considered review regarding the property standards bylaw and how that would look would definitely need to be conducted.
Well, I'm glad to see that recommendation, and I support the work on this and the plan. Thank you.
Councillor Halpin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Thanks for this report. It certainly was a great deal of discussion in our environmental ad hoc committee. And I think we're doing the right thing. That you you can use sticks or you can use carrots with people. And I believe we're going to get a lot further with the good people of Saugeen Shores by just using carrots, incentives, subsidies for trees. People want to plant trees and people like trees. And my one kind of question about this is are we starting planting trees in 2025, or does this mean that, I guess what I'm kind of worried about is like the last 2 years, we really increased tree sales. And is 25 going to be kind of a small year for tree planting or is this not going to, is there any chance that any of this would happen in 25 or everything is going to be in 26?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So, I mean, we'll be doing minimal changes to the annual tree sale. But otherwise, we do have planting programs that we've identified. I can't recall off the top of my head which ones we have highlighted as, say, high priority, and being the short term being implemented within the 1 year. I know there are a few that are seen as longer term because they will take longer. Like the 10,000 trees, for example, will take a little bit more time to implement over years. But definitely the hope and the thought is that we will look to increase tree planting as of next year.
As of 2025?
That is
Yes. Okay, great. And one of the things that, like just in reading the report and everything, I'd like to mention this, that like if someone's reading it, they'd see that there's a price of like $650 a tree. But we're also looking at smaller trees also, which are substantially cheaper. And so, if we're going for $10,000 or 10,000 trees, there's going to be significant savings to going to the smaller type trees like Saugeen Valley plants, which are coming in at $50 and $60 rather than $600 a tree. So that could be some significant cost savings. And I was pleased to learn from Saugeen Valley Conservation that those trees that are like from 3 to 6 feet and the smaller diameter actually have a higher success rate than the bigger trees as well. So I'm really excited about this plan. Thank you for all your work on it, and thank you for all your patience with our committee.
So I have Davinsky, then Mayette, then the deputy mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Kristen, thank you very much for this report. If you go to recommendation 8, it talks about reforesting and planting of small high-density patches, and then you named a few examples on town-owned lands, and you said including the closed landfill in Port Elgin. First of all, for dog owners, the leash-free dog park is not closed. It's the landfill that's closed, so don't panic there. How do we marry these forest or microforests and trees with dogs running around in a leash-free area? Will this work?
through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So initially there were questions about planting potential microforests in the landfill. It is something that we did consult our consultant on and are aware of the potential precautions that will need to be taken. Dogs love a good tree for good reasons. So I think it's definitely something that will be a benefit not only to the community, but to the dog park as well.
Good answer. Thank you very much.
Okay, then I got Councillor Mayette and then the deputy mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, and through you. Kristen, good. I really enjoyed going through the report again. When I started looking, when I was going through, I started thinking, what kind of complaints or issues have been brought to me over the years around trees? And most of the time it's been trees along the shoreline, because people who live with either have a waterfront or a near waterfront property love to be able to look out and see the sunset and maybe Chantry Island. And I've had a number of people approach and say, well, when we first bought this place 20 years ago, we had a beautiful view, and now we've got these scrubby poplars and birch trees maybe, and they're all full of vines, and the hawthorn trees have grown up, and now we can't see it anymore. And we'd like to return it to the way it used to be and cut those. And then they'll cite instances of where the neighbor 3 doors up or over here has already gone ahead and done it. and nobody said anything about it and they got away with it. You know, it's just cut and deny but if they go through the official request program, of course, the answer is no. And we've had a couple times where there have been people who have been found guilty of removing trees on the say the right of way and when I started reading through here, it talked about compensatory planting. So I think it was referring to like a developer. So if a developer is clearing an area and they have to cut down 500 trees, we may require them to plant 500 trees somewhere else. So I'm thinking one of the constituents that may have this issue where across the road now they got these old poplars that have grown up over the past 10 or 15 years because they grow pretty fast, these poplars, and they want to restore could they approach and say, we're willing to buy some nice trees and plant them somewhere else on maybe the dog park or maybe in one of the other parks or town property so that we can get our view back. And because when I look at the picture on the front page of the draft proposal, it's showing exactly that. You see there's large trees on, I think it's North Shore Park, but somebody has cut out the middle to make a nice view of the harbor and the bay here, right? And this is what, you know, a lot of people like to have when they live there. So would that be a scenario that could be envisioned where somebody says, yeah, I want to cut down all these scrap poplars, and in return, I'm going to plant 20 maples in town or oaks or something, right?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. I think it sounds like something to that extent would need to be considered, I would say, through the tree conservation bylaw, the urban tree conservation bylaw. And I think at this time, based on the environmental committee's recommendations, is that we are looking to address specifically woodlot or woodlands. And I would say if that particular plot of land does fall within that woodlot or woodland, then they would have a potential scenario where they could apply for a permit, have those trees removed, and replace those trees either on that property or into a tree reserve fund, which we could then plant elsewhere. But this is obviously hypothetical to the urban tree conservation bylaw at this time.
The Director of Development Services has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add to Kristen's thoughts there, which I think would really be around somebody cutting a tree on their own front lawn that they feel is blocking their view, distinct from trees on the shoreline that are public owned lands. I think that would be a different conversation. And I think one of the things we talk about as staff is how the shoreline of the town is a linear park. And so I think the thoughts around vegetation along the shoreline would need to be part of a kind of a comprehensive planning exercise to really understand what kind of vegetation we want there, and also underlying the concern that we wouldn't want to create erosion problems by removing trees, which are, in some places, the trees are holding that together. So that would be part of the thinking that we would be applying to that thought. Yeah.
Councilor Matt?
Just as a quick follow-up, I'd appreciate if you're involved in the draft bylaw, keep that in the back of your mind.
So I have the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just as a continuing comment about what kinds of trees we want there, sometimes it's also what kind of trees we need there. And trees don't just help with erosion, they provide a lot of other habitat situations and that sort of thing. I did want to, excuse me, follow up with, oh my gosh, recommendations 11 and 12, which have to do about this replacement idea. And I wanted to ask how we work towards something that we understand and appreciate the value to come before something happens. The reason why I ask this is because I think these are about the development situations where the idea is if a certain number of trees of a certain number of a certain size get cut down, there's encouragement concerning the number to be replanted and the size of those. But often what happens is trees disappear before we even get the chance to question. So I just wanted to say that I applaud the inclusion of recommendation 11 and 12, but I would encourage that, you know, we consider how to get that education out there so that as the trees are being thought about to be removed or in fact being removed, that there's an awareness of the number that are disappearing and the size of them, because it's easier to imagine the replacement value at that time than trying to figure out, well, how many did you cut down afterwards and how big were they? I wanted to pick up on a couple of other recommendations that I thought were very appealing going forward. I hope that we end up with a citizen environmental committee. That's recommendation 20. I hope that there's a point person within the town. I don't know what the recommendation number was, but some kind of person who champions the tree thing across multiple departments. I see that as a very good, point person to have going forward. The tree tracking, I don't know if that's how it's referred to, about how citizens kind of inventory some cool trees throughout the committee. The Municipal Heritage Committee thought about doing this years ago. We called it our Trees of Significant program. We didn't get very far with it for many reasons, but that's a good idea too. And it's not just about education, it's about celebration of really cool trees that are in the community. The education aspect, I did want to just follow up with one of the objectives is about exploring partnership opportunities. I believe that the Southport Horticultural Society for their 2025 program has already got a speaker on the list, a well-known speaker in Ontario about these microforests and these mini forests. Excellent opportunity for the community to learn a little bit more about them and how they work. And, you've done a little bit of research too. There's a great partnership opportunity. Also, I believe the Southport Horticultural Society has engaged a speaker to come who's from the Tree Trust organization, which is a citizen sort of group organization throughout Ontario. It might be a little bit further afield too, but they look at older trees and the arbor activity surrounding pruning and that sort of thing to prolong the life of a tree. So I know that there's going to be a speaker. I believe there's a speaker coming to a horticultural society meeting related to that kind of thing too. So I'm really thrilled about the education idea, and the town over the years has had some success with different kinds of series of talks or series of presentations. I remember some that were at the Flag in Southampton, at the Pavilion at the beach in Port Elgin, and at Fairy Lakes Pavilion associated with shoreline issues. So I really hope that some of that comes to fruition surrounding some of these education components. But it's a very exciting document to have in our hands. And I just hope it doesn't end up on a shelf. So I'm glad that you're championing it at the moment, but I hope we have additional support over the next couple of years to realize many of the recommendations that are in here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Further comments or questions from members? I don't see anybody. I just echo that. It's a great work and it's a great document to have. People are very keen on us protecting the tree canopy as best we can. And I think, as Councillor Gray said, you've struck a good balance here in terms of protecting those areas. Let's talk about protecting those more significant wood lots within the urban area. Those are, I think, precious to people, and we want to make sure they're as well protected as they can be in the context of zoning and all those other things that are in place. And also, and most importantly, a redoubled effort on protecting the trees that the public owns, right? Those, I understand the interest that people have in having a view of the lake or in looking through a park or whatever, but those trees belong to all the people of the community. And you cut one, it's a criminal act. And so it's vandalism. And so we need to have, I think, as harsh a penalty regime as we possibly can to discourage people from cutting down the people's trees and wherever they are. So I think that that's certainly a bylaw that we ought to be getting in place. And that's the part I'm most interested in. And then some regulation around more significant woodlots within the urban boundary, I think is key as well. So I'm keen to see that come forward. I think the public is as well. The only area I am concerned about in here is recommendation 13, which I flagged. Recommendation. Yeah, it's recommendation 13. Or is it 15? 13 and 15 are reversed in here, actually. It's in this list as recommendation 15 about amending the official plan to recognize public trees as green infrastructure and inclusion in the asset management policy. I really am not convinced that this idea of a classification of non-core biologic assets belongs in the asset management plan because they aren't the same as any other asset. Like they don't depreciate. You can't compare a tree to a bridge any more than you can compare a person to a bridge, right? Like because you can't value it and then replace it like you can a bridge. You can't say the tree, a 100-year-old tree is worth X amount of dollars and go out and buy a new one. You can't buy a new 100-year-old tree. Like it's not it. And so as a result, I think if you add hundreds and thousands of assets of that type to our asset management plans, you're going to turn the asset management plan from a useful financial document into a strange political document. Like it politicizes the document. It's a financial document. And so anyway, I think that I appreciate that there's some requirement to classify those things as part of the asset management regulations from the province, but I think we should find a way to segregate that information from the rest of the asset management plan, because I really think that if you mix trees in there, you will take that, we will have a harder time trying to understand what our financial obligations are in the future, and then set budgets and plan for those financial obligations. So I guess I just flag that for now. I'm going to be interested to see what staff brings forward on that, and hopefully it's something that makes sense. I guess the only other comment I'll make is on the recommendation itself that council approve the urban tree canopy plan. It's like we are not approving all of the items in this plan, all these recommendations, right? These will come back probably in pieces to be considered by council one by one. Many of them have financial implications, right? We're not approving the recommendations. I just wonder if we ought to receive this plan rather than approve it, because I'm not certain that that's what we're doing. We probably will approve most, if not all, that's in here, but we need to see it piece by piece, understand the implications, and then approve those items. So that's my only thought. I don't know. Could the deputy mayor?
I understand what you're trying to say, but the plan does say that its implementation occur over a period of time with reassessments along the way. And it's not very specifically saying this is going to happen at this time and that sort of thing. So I think it's worth approving, but I understand what you're saying too. But I just don't want it to be, oh, well, it was a nice report. We just received it. It's got more to it than that I don't want that to be missed. So how can we do both?
Yeah, and I just don't want there to be any misunderstanding from people who are from the public that we have approved all of these items for implementation. We haven't. And so they all have to come back. We have to adopt them in different ways. I just don't want there to be confusion. Maybe we'll get the director first. Do you want to speak to it? And then we'll come to the vice deputy mayor.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to offer a suggestion. Another approach could be to endorse the plan, which gives it gives it the weight of council, but it doesn't necessarily commit council to implementing everything in detail. That's of help.
Okay, the vice deputy mayor.
And another way of doing it is approving in principle. And we've done that before in the past as well. I guess you're correct. I think if we approve the plan, for the future viewers of this report can interpret that, well, we approved that plan. And who's to say we shouldn't be assuming that we're approving everything in that plan to move forward, so I think that Mark's idea is a good one. I think approving in principles is another way to go as well.
So you're, Vice Deputy Mayor, you're the mover of the report of the recommendation, so you can amend it if you like.
Mark, what was your wording again?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we just replace the word approve with the word endorse. And then it would read that council endorsed the plan.
Yeah, it's lesser wording than approving, Mr. Mayor. I guess I like your thoughts on council about that. I guess I think endorsing.
I think it's not that critical as long, I think approval is a little bit too strong. I think any other word, you could endorse it, you could approve it in principle, anything that just makes it clear that we aren't approving everything. And so whatever you choose.
Well, my motion would be then to approve in principle, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so the seconder was Grace. Are you okay with that change, Councillor Grace? Moving in principle?
Yes, I just want to say that under next steps in the report, it says implementation of the plan entails initiatives, budget expenditures, staffing resources that are not contained in the 2025 budget that will be brought forward to council for consideration and approval before activated. So there is that language in there as well.
I think that's understood.
Proven principle. It doesn't matter to me.
So you're okay with the change?
Yes.
Right, so it's moved and seconded then that council approve the urban tree canopy plan in principle. Moved by the Vice Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Grace. Discussion, Councillor Helbin?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. And remember, we have the bylaw coming back to us to look at also. So we're certainly not approving a bylaw here. So thank you.
Okay, so it has been changed. If there's any further discussion? Seeing none, then all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, so now we're on to, 10.6, assumption of stormwater works for Summerside, the manager development services.
Well, I don't have anything to add. I guess here for questions if you have them.
Okay, so the recommendation is the council adopt bylaw 103, 2024, a bylaw to authorize assumption of stormwater associated with the Summerside subdivision. Is there a mover and seconder? The deputy mayor and Councillor Stack. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. And then next is Northport Meadows, Phase 2B pre-servicing, and the Development Services Officer, Candace Ham. Do you have comments for us, Candace?
Thank you, Mayor Charbonneau. The only comment that I would add is to mention that this pre-servicing agreement, in addition to allowing the services for Phase 2B, will also facilitate construction of the third apartment in Phase 3. So that's just a point of additional piece of information.
Okay, so the recommendation is the council adopt bylaw 104, 2024, a bylaw to authorize a pre-servicing agreement with Barry's Construction and Installation Limited for the Northport Meadows subdivision Phase 2B. Mover and seconder, Councillor Mayette, Councillor Davinsky. Questions or comments? The deputy mayor.
Just through you, I'd like to encourage consideration of how the street gets named, because I think there's a new street here. So, certainly it would be nice if we at least attempted to follow some guidance or direction. Isn't there a new street down the middle, or is it already named?
I can't recall, but we do have a street naming policy now. That was adopted recently. Am I right about that, or am I wrong? Oh, is it coming up? All right, Candace, sorry, Candace.
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau, I had assumed that this would be an extension of Rosner Drive that's located to the west, but this would not be a new name. It would be continuation of that same street.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. All right, now we're on to 10.8, which is Cenotaph Ad Hoc Committee mandate, and I'll speak to this one very briefly. This is a recommendation from the striking committee. You'll see there's a committee mandate for a ad hoc committee for the Cenotaph, the Southampton Cenotaph. This is what as being delivered to you as directed as part of the budget discussions. So it's here for your consideration. The recommendation is that council adopt the Cenotaph Ad Hoc Committee mandate as presented. Is there a mover and seconder? The deputy mayor, Councillor Grace. Any discussion on this item? You okay? Okay. All right, so if there's no further questions or comments, then I'll ask all in favor. And that is carried. All right, so now we're going to move back up the agenda to item 7, close to public, and it's recommended to enter a close to public session to discuss personal matters about identifiable individuals in relation to the Cenotaph Ad Hoc Committee appointments. So the recommendation is the council move into a closed public session in accordance with the Municipal Act 2001, Section 2392B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Is there a mover and seconder? The deputy mayor and Stack, all in favor? That is carried. Council will now move into a closed public session. Am I okay to start? Sorry, guys. Yes. Okay. So I have a resolution here that council arise from the close to public session and resume the regular council meeting. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Stack, seconded by Halpin. All in favor? That is carried. And I do have a report here to read from closed. And so I can report that council is going to consider the following recommendation now in public. The recommendation is that council appoint Cenotaph ad hoc committee members as recommended by the striking committee. The list of appointees will be listed in the council meeting minutes, but I will read the committee appointments now. They are public members, Connie Barker, Harry Masmanian, Mike Smith, and John Willits. And the council members will be the Deputy Mayor, Diane Huber, as chair, Councillor John Davinsky, and Councillor Cheryl Grace. Is there a mover and seconder for the recommendation? Moved by the Vice Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Davinsky. Questions or comments? Seeing none, then all in favor? That is carried. Okay, so now we're all the way back down to the end of the agenda, bylaws. And there are, how many? 5 bylaws there for consideration. Anybody wish to consider any of those bylaws on its own? The Deputy Mayor?
Should one of them be isolated out because it's the one?
Oh, yes, that's right. I have
Okay.
pecuniary interest on 12.2. So we will, I'll read the resolution with the rest of them, and then I'll let the Deputy Mayor handle that one. Anybody else have anything else to identify there? Seeing none, then I have a resolution that bylaws 100, 102, 103, and 104 are hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed the 16th day of December, 2024. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Halpin, seconded by Stack. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. And the Deputy Mayor, you want to read this? Or you have it?
I have a recommendation that bylaw 101-2024, amending a zoning bylaw, is hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 16th day of December 2024. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Mayette, seconded by Councillor Halpin. All those in favor? That's carried.
Okay, thank you. Then I have, we're on to 13. I have a
Councillor
resolution.
Davinsky wants to, sorry, I didn't say any opposed. He's just indicating he was opposed.
Oh, my apologies. Okay, we'll move on to the confirmatory bylaw and his resolution that bylaw 105-2024, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores, hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 16th day of December 2024. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Stack, seconded by Davinsky. All in favor? That is carried. And finally, a resolution of this regular council meeting on December 16, 2024, hereby adjourns at 9:11 p.m. Is there a mover and seconder? The Deputy Mayor, Mayette, all in favor? Council stands adjourned, and Merry Christmas, everybody. It's our last meeting, so have a good Christmas and a Happy New Year. We'll see you next year.
No, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas, Justin.